The rain had started gently, a soft drizzle that turned the world silver. By the time Emily and her family had packed up the picnic, the clouds had thickened into a steady downpour. Daniel laughed as he hurried everyone toward the cars. "Quick, before we all turn into puddles," he shouted. They piled into Mark's SUV. It was the closest. The sound of rain drumming on the roof filled the small space, and the world outside blurred into a watercolor of trees and light. Lily cradled a sleepy Sophie in her arms. Daniel leaned forward, glancing out the fogged window. "Let's wait it out," he said. "Looks like it'll pass soon." Emily sat quietly beside Mark in the back seat, the hum of the rain making everything feel enclosed, almost sacred. She could hear Sophie's soft breathing, the steady rhythm of the storm, and somewhere beneath all that, her own heart. Quietly, THUDD, Ang. The warmth of the car contrasted the cool air outside. And though the others chatted softly, Emily and Mark sat in a pocket of silence that felt different. Not awkward, but charged with everything left unspoken. After a while, Lily looked back with a sleepy smile. "We'll give you two a ride home when this clears," she murmured. "Daniel's going to run for coffee." Daniel grinned. "You too behave," he teased, opening his door and dashing out into the rain. Emily laughed under her breath, shaking her head, but when the door closed and the sound of their footsteps faded, the car fell quiet again, just her and Mark, the steady rain, and the low hum of the world outside. She glanced at him. He was looking out the window, his expression thoughtful, distant. "You're quiet," Shay said softly. He turned toward her, smiling faintly. "Just thinking." "About what?" He hesitated before answering. "About how sometimes you meet people at the exact moment you didn't know you needed them." The words caught her off guard. She didn't speak right away, afraid that if she did, the moment might break. Mark looked down, running his thumb across the edge of his seat. "I wasn't planning on coming today," he admitted. Daniel insisted. "Said it would be good for me. I didn't think he was right until—" His voice trailed off, and Emily finished the thought quietly. "Until now." He met her eyes then, directly, sincerely. "Yeah, until now." Her breath hitched slightly. The rain outside seemed to grow softer, like it was listening. "I've spent a lot of time pretending I'm okay," Mark continued. "Taking care of everyone else, keeping busy, keeping things steady. But lately I've realized that being steady doesn't always mean being alive. I think I forgot what it felt like to really feel something." His honesty was raw, unpolished, and it struck something deep within her. "Mark," she began, but he shook his head gently. "You don't have to say anything," he said. "It's just when I saw you today, I recognized it. That quiet ache you carry. The kind that doesn't show on your face but lives somewhere in your chest. I know it because I've felt it too." Emily's throat tightened. She looked down at her hands, folded neatly in her lap, and for a moment she couldn't speak. Then, in a quiet voice that trembled with truth, she said, "You're right. I've been hiding it. I tell everyone I'm fine, that I just needed time. But time isn't what heals you. People do. Moments do." She glanced up at him, her eyes glistening. "And somehow today, it's the first time I've felt safe again. Like maybe the world hasn't forgotten me." Mark's eyes softened, his expression filled with something both tender and understanding. "The world could never forget you, Emily." They sat in silence after that, the kind that said more than words could. The rain had slowed to a light mist. Outside, the horizon glowed faintly with the first hint of returning sun. The air inside the car felt different now, not heavy, but alive, charged with quiet emotion. Mark turned slightly toward her. "You know," he said, his tone gentle, "when I first saw you by the river today, I thought you looked like someone who used to smile often and was just waiting for a reason to start again." Emily's lips parted, her breath catching just slightly. "And what did you think when you saw me now?" He smiled softly. "That maybe you just found one." The moment hung there, fragile, real, and impossibly still. They didn't touch. They didn't need to. It was the kind of closeness that lived in words left unsaid, in the shared air between two people finally brave enough to be honest. A small tear slipped down Emily's cheek, not from sadness, but from release. "You don't know how long I've been waiting to feel something that isn't pain," she whispered. "I think I do," he said quietly, "because I've been waiting too." She laughed softly through the emotion, shaking her head. How is it that two people can meet like this in the middle of a family picnic, of all things, and end up talking like they've known each other forever? "Maybe that's how it's supposed to happen," he said simply. "The unexpected moments, they're the ones that find you when you stop looking." A knock on the window startled them both. Daniel's grin appealed through the glass, holding 2 cups of steaming coffee. "We brought reinforcements," he said cheerfully. Mark chuckled, rolling down the window to take them. "Perfect timing," he said, handing one to Emily Dot as Daniel and Lily climbed back in. The car filled again with light conversation and laughter. But beneath it all, something had changed. Emily felt it, that invisible thread between her and Mark, woven through shared silence and truth. She didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel afraid to find out as the rain faded completely and the first streak of orange returned to the sky. Emily looked out the window and smiled quietly, genuinely. Because sometimes the turning point doesn't arrive with fireworks or fanfare. Sometimes it comes with rain, honesty, and the simple courage to say what's been waiting in your heart all along. The sun returned the next morning, gentle, golden, and almost shy, like the world itself was waking up tenderly after the rain. Emily stood by the kitchen window, a cup of tea warming her hands, watching the droplets slide down the glass. The world outside was still damp and fresh, carrying that scent only rain can bring, a mix of earth, grass, and quiet new beginnings. She thought about the day before, the picnic, the laughter, the rain, and that quiet moment in the car when everything changed without needing to be declared. Something inside her had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, in the way a heart knows it's time to begin again. Behind her, the sound of soft footsteps made her turn. It was her mother, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "You're up early," she said gently. Emily smiled faintly. "Couldn't sleep much." Her mother nodded knowingly. "You've been smiling more lately." Emily laughed softly, looking down at her tea. "Maybe I've just remembered how." Her mother didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. Sometimes the people who love you can sense when something in your spirit has started to heal. She simply squeezed Emily's hand before heading back down the hall. By noon, Daniel called, full of energy as always. "We're doing a little family lunch. Just leftovers, but everyone's coming by. And yes," he added with playful emphasis, "Mark will be here too." Emily rolled her eyes, though she could feel her heart give a small, traitorous flutter. "Daniel," she warned, trying not to sound amused. He chuckled. "Hey, I didn't say anything. I'm just making sure you bring your famous salad." "Fine," she said with a smile. "I'll see you soon." She hung up. She caught her reflection in the kitchen window. She noticed how she looked different, not in the mirror, but in her eyes. The dullness that had followed her for months had softened. There was color again, light even. Maybe this was what peace looked like when it started to return. The family lunch was lively and warm. Children ran through the garden, chasing bubbles. Lily was trying to keep Sophie from feeding bread to the dog. And Daniel was laughing loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. When Mark arrived, he looked almost surprised by the joy around him and by the sight of Emily, standing by the flower table arranging plates. Their eyes met briefly across the laughter and movement. Just one look enough to say, "I'm glad you're here." They didn't rush to each other. They didn't need to. Sometimes peace grows in stillness. Later, when the afternoon quieted and most of the family was busy inside, Emily found herself outside again, this time under the same tree they had sat beneath the day before. The rain had washed everything clean, and the ground sparkled in tiny glimmers of light. Mark walked over, holding 2 cups of lemonade. "Peace offering," he said with a soft grin. She accepted one, smiling. "Do I look like I needed peace?" He tilted his head thoughtfully. "No. You look like you've already found it." They both sat down, watching the last few clouds drift lazily across the sky. After a quiet moment, Emily spoke first. Yesterday, what you said about forgetting how to feel, I know exactly what you meant. For a long time, I thought healing meant forgetting. But it doesn't. It means remembering without breaking. Mark nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. Maybe that's what brought us here, to remind each other of that. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not just the man sitting beside her, but someone who had been through his own storms, someone who understood loss, silence, and starting over. And yet, here he was, smiling into the sunlight like someone who had learned to hope again. I used to think, Emily said softly, that my story had already been written, that all the best parts were behind me, and now? He asked. Now, she said, smiling gently, I think May. The morning light slipped quietly through Emily Parker's window, falling across the soft blue walls of her small apartment. The air was still, almost too quiet, the kind of silence that reminded her how long it had been since laughter had filled the space. She sat at the edge of her bed, a steaming cup of coffee in her hands, watching the world outside begin its ordinary rhythm. Cars rolled by, people walked their dogs, a neighbor waved to someone down the street. Life was moving, steady, simple, but she felt like she was watching it all from a distance. It had been nearly 6 months since her life had changed. 6 months since the plans she had built, the future she had believed in, quietly fell apart. The end of her engagement had been gentle on the surface. No harsh words, no drama. Just two people realizing they weren't meant to walk the same path anymore. But sometimes, the quiet endings are the ones that echo the loudest. Emily had left the city soon after, moving back to her small hometown in Maplewood, a place of wide fields, friendly faces, and memories that seemed both comforting and heavy. Her parents had passed a few years ago, leaving behind their old farmhouse that now stood mostly empty except for Daniel, her older brother, who lived nearby with his wife and little daughter. He had offered her to stay with them. But Emily had chosen a small apartment on the edge of town. She told herself she needed space to think, to breathe, to find herself again. But the truth was, she didn't really know what she was searching for. That morning, as the sunlight warmed her face, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a message from Daniel. Family picnic today at Willow Creek Park. No excuses this time, Em. We're starting at noon. She smiled faintly. Her brother had always been the one who tried to pull her out of her shell. He worried about her. She knew that. But she also knew how easy it was to keep saying maybe next time until the invitations stopped coming. She sipped her coffee and stared at the text for a long moment. She could almost hear her sister-in-law Lily's cheerful voice saying, "It won't be the same without you." And Sophie, her 6-year-old niece, would probably ask why Aunt Emily never came anymore. Her chest ached a little at the thought. It wasn't that she didn't love them. She did, deeply. But something inside her had grown cautious. After the breakup, even simple joy felt unfamiliar. She wasn't sure how to let herself feel again, without fearing that the warmth might vanish, like it always seemed to. Still, something about Daniel's message lingered in her mind. The park, the laughter, the family. Maybe it was exactly what she needed. Not to fix everything, but just to remember that life still had places where light could reach her. She stood, opened her closet, and reached for a light blue dress, one she hadn't worn in months. It wasn't fancy, but it had always made her feel quietly confident. She brushed her hair, tied it loosely, and looked at her reflection in the mirror. For a moment, she almost didn't recognize herself, not because of how she looked, but because of how she felt. Uncertain, fragile, but maybe a little hopeful. She packed a simple salad, a few sandwiches, and a checkered blanket she found tucked away in a drawer. As she placed everything into a small picnic basket, she thought of her parents, how they used to take her and Daniel to the same park when they were kids. Willow Creek had been their family's favorite spot. Her father used to call it the place where good things happen. Emily smiled softly. Maybe it was time to see if that was still true. By late morning, she stepped outside. The cool breeze brushed against her skin as she locked the door and walked to her car. The streets of Maplewood were lined with golden leaves, the last signs of autumn before winter would come. Families were out and about, small town chatter filling the air as she drove through familiar roads. Old memories came and went. High school friends, her favorite coffee shop, the bookstore where she used to spend her weekends. So much of it had stayed the same, yet everything inside her felt different. When she reached a stoplight, she glanced at the sky. It was bright and open, dotted with soft clouds. For the first time in a long while, Emily whispered something quietly to herself. A thought, a wish. Maybe today can be a good day. She didn't know it yet, but that single decision to step out of her quiet world and join her family would set something in motion. A moment that seemed small at first would grow into something unexpected. It would lead her to a conversation that would stir her heart again, to laughter that didn't feel forced, and to someone whose presence would remind her that endings aren't always final. Sometimes they're simply the start of something new. And as she turned onto the familiar dirt road leading to Willow Creek Park, Emily didn't see it coming. The way one simple family day would change everything she thought she knew about love, healing, and belonging. The park's trees swayed. In the distance, sunlight flickering through their branches like old memories calling her home. Emily took a deep breath and smiled, unaware that by the end of the day, her heart, once guarded and unsure, would begin to open again. Because sometimes it's not the grand events or perfect plans that change our lives. Sometimes it's just one unexpected family day and the courage to show up for it. The park was alive with the easy rhythm of family laughter, distant music, and the rustle of leaves dancing in the wind. Emily parked her car near the old willow trees and stepped out, the sound of her niece's voice instantly cutting through the air. "Aunt Emily," Sophie shouted, her small legs carrying her across the grass with determined joy. Emily knelt down just in time to catch her in a hug, the child's warmth grounding her in a way nothing else had for months. "I missed you, sweetheart," she whispered. Daniel and Lily waved from a few feet away. Her brother's grin was wide, and for a moment, Emily felt the weight of time, how much she had missed these simple, ordinary moments. "You actually came," Daniel teased as he handed her a paper cup of lemonade. "Don't sound so surprised," Emily replied with a faint smile. He laughed. "Hey, I'll take what I can get." Lily began unpacking sandwiches and fruit onto the picnic table, humming to herself as Sophie arranged napkins with exaggerated care. It was all so familiar, like watching a scene she'd once known by heart but hadn't seen in years. Emily took a quiet breath. Maybe coming here had been the right choice after all. A few minutes later, Daniel called out, "Hey, someone's here to help me carry the firewood from the truck." Emily turned and saw a man walking toward them, tall, dressed casually in a gray shirt and dark jeans. His expression was calm but kind, his movements confident yet unhurried. "This is Mark," Daniel said, waving him over. "We went to college together. He's helping out with the community shelter project." Mark offered a polite smile as he shook Emily's hand. "Nice to finally meet you, Emily. I've heard a lot about you." Emily tilted her head slightly. "Should I be worried about what you've heard?" Mark chuckled. "Nothing too dangerous, mostly that you're the creative one who's hard to convince to leave the house." "Sounds accurate," she said, smiling in spite of herself. It was a brief exchange, but something about his voice, calm, genuine, lingered with her. She couldn't quite place it, but there was a quiet familiarity in the way he looked at her. Like he understood something she hadn't said out loud. As the afternoon went on, the park filled with more families. Children chased each other through the grass, and the scent of grilled food hung in the air. Emily found a spot near the river, sitting beneath the shade of a maple tree. A few minutes later, Mark walked over carrying 2 cups of lemonade. "Thought you might want a refill," he said. "Thank you," she replied softly, accepting it. They sat side by side, a comfortable silence between them, the sound of water and distant laughter filling the space. "You know," Mark began after a moment, "your brother talks a lot about you. He said you used to paint landscapes, right? I used to, she said, staring at the river's reflection. I stopped a while ago. Why? She hesitated. Life got complicated. I guess I just lost the spark. He nodded, not pressing, only listening, and somehow that made her want to speak more. I thought I knew what my life was supposed to look like. She continued, her voice quiet. I had everything planned, my career, my future, the person I was going to build it all with. But when it all fell apart, it was like someone erased the map. I didn't know where to go next. Mark looked out at the river. Sometimes the best parts of life happen after the map changes. Emily turned to him, caught off guard by his calm certainty. You sound like someone who knows that from experience. I do, he admitted. A few years ago, I lost my dad. After that, my priorities shifted. I realized I'd spent so long chasing what I thought I needed, I'd forgotten to take care of what really mattered. There was no heaviness in his tone, just honesty. And that made the moment feel even more real. They continued to talk slowly, as though rediscovering the art of real conversation. It wasn't about impressing or performing, it was about remembering that connection didn't have to be complicated. At one point, Sophie ran up, breathless with excitement. Uncle Mark, Aunt Emily, look, I found a heart-shaped leaf, she exclaimed, holding it up proudly. Mark smiled and took it carefully from her hand. You're right, it is, he said. That's lucky, you know. Sophie turned to Emily. You can keep it, Aunt Emily. Maybe it'll make you happy again. Emily's breath caught. The child's words were sim. The sun had dipped lower now, painting the park in shades of gold and rose. The laughter of families drifted softly through the air, but around Emily and Mark. Time seemed to move differently, slower, quieter, almost suspended. They had spent the last hour talking about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, favorite movies, the little things that made life beautiful. Yet beneath their calm words ran an invisible current. Something neither of them dared to name. Emily watched the way the light touched the river, turning it into a path of shimmering gold. It's strange, she said softly, how the world can look so peaceful even when you don't feel that way inside. Mark nodded. Yeah, it's like the world keeps moving, waiting for us to catch up. Their eyes met for a moment, long enough to feel the weight of what neither wanted to admit. Both of them were carrying invisible stories, quiet heartbreaks, and moments they had never fully shared with anyone else. Mark looked down, his thumb tracing the rim of his paper cup. You know, he said, his voice low but gentle, I used to come here a lot. After my dad passed, I'd sit by this same river and just ... listen. I guess it made me feel like I wasn't alone. Emily tilted her head slightly. Did it help? Some days it did, he said. Other days it just reminded me how quiet the world can be when you're missing someone. She nodded slowly, understanding too well. I know that quiet, she whispered. He glanced at her then, not with pity, but recognition. That kind of look that says, I understand without any words at all. The soft breeze played with a strand of Emily's hair, and she brushed it aside absently. Her heart ached in a way that wasn't painful, just full of memories she hadn't allowed herself to feel for a long time. I used to think love meant never breaking, she said after a while. But maybe love is what helps you when everything does break. Mark's lips curved in a faint, thoughtful smile. Maybe it's what teaches you how to start again. The honesty in his tone made her chest tighten. She wanted to ask him what had broken for him, what part of his heart still carried that quiet ache. But she didn't. Some things didn't need to be spoken to be understood. The space between them wasn't filled with words, but with something else, a calm awareness. Fragile, yet comforting. A family nearby began packing up their picnic, their children laughing as they chased bubbles through the fading sunlight. Emily watched them for a moment, a small smile touching her lips. My parents used to bring us here, she said quietly. Every summer. My dad would say that the best conversations happen outdoors. Maybe he was right. Mine said something similar, Mark replied. He always believed that the simplest days could be the ones that stay with you forever. Emily looked at him. And do they? He thought for a moment. Yeah, he said finally. They do. Especially the ones you don't plan. His words lingered in the air, and Emily felt her heartbeat slow. It struck her how natural it felt to talk to him as if they had known each other longer than a single afternoon. There was a quiet rhythm between them, built not on shared history, but on shared humanity. Daniel's voice broke the moment from across the field. Hey, you two! We're starting the bonfire soon. Emily turned toward the sound and waved. When she looked back, Mark was watching her with a small smile. Looks like we've been gone a while, he said. Time slipped away, she admitted. Or maybe we just needed it too. They both stood, brushing grass from their clothes. As they walked back toward the picnic area, the fading lights stretched their shadows long behind them, two figures walking side by side, carrying more in silence than they ever could in words. The bonfire crackled to life as twilight deepened. Families gathered close, the air filled with warmth and laughter. Sophie sat beside Emily, roasting marshmallows with the kind of joy only children have. Mark sat across from them, his face soft in the firelight, his expression unreadable yet full of thought. For a moment, Emily caught herself staring, not in admiration, but in quiet curiosity. There was something about him that reminded her of calm water, steady, reflective, deep. Their eyes met again across the fire. It was brief, almost accidental, but in that fleeting instant, something passed between them, an understanding, an awareness that neither of them had expected. Emily looked away first, focusing on Sophie's laughter. But she felt it, that quiet flutter inside her chest, the one she thought she had forgotten how to feel later. As the night grew darker, Daniel began telling stories from their childhood, making everyone laugh until tears filled their eyes. Emily joined in, but every now and then she felt Mark's gaze on her, gentle, steady, never intrusive. It wasn't attraction in the usual sense. It was recognition, the kind that comes when two people who have known loss begin to see light again in one another's presence. When the fire burned lower and the stars took their place in the sky, Mark stood up and offered his hand. Walk with me. Emily hesitated for just a second before taking it. His hand was warm, grounding. They didn't go far. To the edge of the river where the moonlight shimmered on the water's surface. They stood there quietly, side by side, watching the reflection ripple gently. Mark finally spoke, his voice almost a whisper. It's strange how life brings people together, not when we expect it, but when we're ready to listen. Emily's eyes softened. Maybe that's how we heal, she said. Neither of them said more after that. There was no need. The night breeze brushed against them, carrying the scent of pine and distant laughter. And though no promises were spoken, something real had begun to take root. Fragile, uncertain, but undeniably alive. As twilight fell, the sky suddenly turned gray. A gust of wind rippled through the park, and drops of rain began to fall. The family scrambled to pack up. But Mark quickly opened the back of his car, where everyone took shelter, laughing as the rain poured harder inside the car. The windows fogged slightly, and the sound of rain softened the world outside. Sophie fell asleep in her mother's arms. Daniel and Lily whispered quietly, and Emily found herself sitting beside Mark. Sharing a blanket he had offered, the conversation turned gentle about family, second chances, and the unexpected turns that lead to new beginnings. Emily felt her chest tighten, not with sadness, but with gratitude. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Quiet moments shared between souls who understood life's tender edges.